Any tips? So welcome everyone. Thank you for LifeStart sponsoring this activity for us. All Care and Timken wanted to, and LifeStart wanted to give you guys an opportunity to just walk through a cooking demonstration. We tried to focus on fall-based recipes today to give you some ideas of quick ways you can make very nourishing foods for your family that don't take a lot of your time, but certainly offer lots and lots of nutrient-dense foods. So we've got a good variety going on here today. I'm going to get started over on this section with our chowder. This is a broccoli kale chicken chowder. We made this using broth. However, I wanted to teach you one important thing with broth. Obviously, it's high in sodium, and one of the biggest concerns people have with soup, if they have elevation in blood pressure or any heart condition, is the salt in those broths. Bone broth is something that you can use to help reduce the sodium and increase the protein and help improve your immunities. So this is a great alternative to use in any of your soup recipes or chowders or stews or chilies as an alternative to broth. I would encourage you to use this in combination with broth or add just a touch of salt to it. It does not have a very salty flavor to it, so you control the amount going in, but this is a great way to get a lower sodium option. Many times I will mix this in with soup. Instead of doing all broth, I'll do half bone broth, half regular broth. In your soup today, I did just regular broth. You will taste a difference when you use bone broth, but it's not a difference that's a displeasing difference. What I'm going to do with this is one step, and then I'm going to move on and we'll come back to this. But the step that I'm doing here is to say you've prepared this already. You just set it into the crock pot before you went to work, put the lid on it. You came home and now you guys are getting ready to think about getting dinner ready. So you're going to take your cornstarch, or if you're using a flour, you can use an oat flour, and I'll show you here in a little bit how to make an oat flour. But I'm going to use cornstarch because it's a thickener that I've always felt works very, very easily and mixes well into anything without the clumps. So I just mix this with a little bit of water. Take my lid off. Obviously it broke. And my items at home are well used. I'm just going to simply give this a good stir. I have the crock pot set on high. So as we're cooking the rest of our foods today, while this sits on high for the next half hour, it's going to mix in this soup, create a small low-level boil, and thicken. You'll see pieces in here. So what I did is I added chicken tenderloins on the bottom, frozen or defrosted, doesn't matter. So if you forget, don't worry. We're going to shred this up just by actually taking and just pressing across it. It doesn't take much to shred this. The next layer is you can use to start with putting your broth in there and then your milk. I use an alternative milk, so you can see you can do a cream soup with an almond milk if you want to. You can use any other kind of dairy-based milk that you choose to. And then you add your vegetables in, and I put the broccoli on top, kale on top. You can use beet greens if you want to for a green. You can use spinach, doesn't matter. And then the rest of your seasonings go inside, put a lid on it, and it just cooked. I cooked this all night so that it was ready for morning. And then I kept it on warm the rest of the day. So this soup is literally ready to go after it takes that half hour. If you want to expedite that process, take about 3 ladles full of your broth out, put it into a little pot on the stove, turn the stove on, and then you can thicken the sauce easily that way, pop it right back in the pan, and it doesn't take that half hour. Maybe it takes 10 minutes at best. So we're going to move on from here to our next station. We want to get started with this. This is our Instapot meal. This meal can also be done with your crock pot. Literally take everything I'm about to do and throw it in the crock pot, put the lid on it, come home from work and dinner's ready. Same concept here. Maybe you didn't remember to bring something out of the freezer before you left for work. Do this all the time. I said, think, okay, what can I create quickly when I get home? Because this is a miracle. If you don't have one and you want to have one, ask Santa to bring you one. It's a wonderful Christmas gift. So we're taking ground turkey, and I'm going to set this to saute. We'll talk about all these different methods you have here so you can have a better feel for how to use an Instapot. No oil is going to go in there first, always, because we have ground turkey that's very lean. It sautés very quickly, much quicker than a frying pan on the stove. Just flip it right. There we go. Okay. in your Instapot. So many things you can do with this. So on the top, you have preset buttons. These buttons allow you to choose exactly how you want your food to be cooked, whether it's a stew or a chili, you have a button specific to that. There's a rice button, a multi-grain, so if you're cooking maybe like a farro, we'll say that's a longer cooking sort of grain, you could use that button. There's a porridge button. I've never used porridge or yogurt, I'm gonna be honest with you. There's a steam button if you just wanna put some veggies in here and steam them quickly. There is a poultry button and a meat button. Obviously, different times on those because they take longer to cook or a shorter temperature, which would be your poultry. Down at the bottom, you have pressure level, delay set. So if you want to set this so that it starts to cook closer to the time that you come home from work, you can do that button. There's a keep warm that automatically is preset. So every time your Instapot is done cooking, it will automatically stay on keep warm until you come and are ready to eat that meal. We talked about yogurt, then there's pressure cook. I use that one probably the most because I don't like to follow recipes. I use them as guides, and that's how I feel about recipes. They are meant to give you guidance, but they don't have to be exactly followed. So with pressure cook, I can adjust things based on time, and that's how we developed, by the way, this recipe and put it into the pressure cooker. With a recipe where you have meats and you have vegetables, some vegetables take longer to cook, others take less time, so you kind of have to manipulate your recipe that way. So what we're doing first is we're going to saute this meat, get it just gently browned. While it's browning, I'm going to come over here and start cutting up the vegetables that go inside. We're going to throw everything in here where this is done and browned, put a lid on it, and we're going to cook it for literally 10 minutes, and our chili is done. How many of us do 2, 3, 4 hours at home with a pot of chili? This is going to taste just exactly like those 2, 3 hours that we do at home, right? And sometimes we cook it and then we put it in the fridge overnight and then eat it the next day because the flavors are better. So the Instapot is, I think, magic because it will cook your meal so quickly. So I'm going to let that do its business while I come over here and start working on the veggies to go into your chili recipe. Honestly, the most labor-intensive part of this recipe is the butternut squash, but I'm going to show you a couple things that I do at home, and maybe you do as well, that help to make it go just a little bit quicker. So I'm going to pull that recipe up first. Let's see. All right, let's start with cloves of garlic. The reason for this is because when you use fresh garlic in a recipe where you're going to cook the garlic, you want to break the garlic open, get it exposed to oxygen so it has a chance to oxidize. And then the allicin that's in the garlic has an opportunity to develop. The allicin is actually the phytonutrient that we want in our bodies when we are thinking about why garlic is good for us. Garlic helps to reduce cholesterol levels, keep them under better control. Certainly not all by itself. We still have to incorporate exercise and a quality diet that's high in fiber from fruits and vegetables. But the garlic is definitely a very supportive nutrient that we want in our bodies. The only way to get the quality from it is exactly the way I'm doing it. So if you have a jar of garlic in your refrigerator at home, throw it away because it has sat there before you even got to your refrigerator for months on the shelf sitting in oil suffocating. So there's no allicin developing in that garlic. That's the reason we want it. This is truly the best way to get the nutrients from the garlic is exactly what I'm doing. If you have a garlic press, that's the easiest way to get this garlic chopped up quickly. It's also well used. Just goes right in this hole, you squeeze it right in. We're gonna just let this garlic sit on the corner here and do its business and activate. So we're gonna go with our onion next. I'm gonna want to throw garbage into this. I can feel it already. So onions are very nourishing. Onions and garlic, truly, you should be keeping tons of this fresh in your home. Maybe you have a little basket somewhere that you keep potatoes in, but onions and garlic should be something that you're buying every week and using in almost every recipe that you are putting together. If you tolerate them, there are some people who don't tolerate onions and garlic very well for whatever their reasons are. But this is a staple for seasoning most of your recipes. And the nutrient density is amazing. Certainly we use a lot of garlic powder and a lot of onion powders from the cupboard. You're definitely not getting the nutrient quality from those powders that you are fresh. And hopefully it's powders you have and not the garlic salt and onion salt. There's a little bit of fiber in onion, not a tremendous amount, but honestly, if you were to look up the fiber content of any fruit or vegetable, you're not going to get a lot out of your fruits and vegetables, and there's nothing wrong with that. The recommendation for fiber is up to 25 grams in a day. However, if you try to start eating that right away, you're going to find yourself in a little bit of misery. That's why it's recommended that you eat between 5 to 10 cups of fruits and vegetables a day. That's an awful lot of fruits and vegetables, but it also doesn't leave much room really for starches. That's really the ideal way to get your fiber content in. If we are halfway sauteed here, hope we don't miss anything off here. Should be good. So I'm going to go ahead and add the onions right on top. Next, we're going to grab a pepper. Any color works just fine. Obviously, the bright colored orange, yellow, red are much sweeter than a green pepper. Nothing wrong with using a green pepper. In this recipe, we have spice coming from adobe peppers in a can. If you don't care for the spice, skip that entirely. If you want more, go get some jalapenos, some ghost peppers, whatever your preference happens to be. But you can certainly add more spice that way. There's also a chili powder that's a chipotle chili powder. So that's another fantastic way to add more spice and chipotle flavor to this recipe. It calls for 1 adobe pepper. Feel free to add more if that is what your taste buds or your family would enjoy. The good thing about peppers is they are loaded with vitamin C, more vitamin C than an orange. Most of us head right to a bag of oranges in the wintertime when we're thinking about our immune system, right? Somebody comes down with something, we start grabbing the orange juice and the oranges. You can actually start grabbing peppers, just as valuable. Certainly plenty of fiber in peppers, not super high, but we don't, again, need it to be super high. Okay, these guys are going in. We're just gonna keep on sauteing while we're adding our veggies. Next, let's start cutting this fella. So you need a very sharp knife. If you don't have a sharp knife at home, this is not going to be a fun task. You'd rather just have a hammer and beat on it because it's about where you're gonna get with it. Just dig in and start kind of rotating your knife around safely. And it doesn't have to look pretty because we are not serving it this way. This color is gorgeous. It kind of reminds me of a sweet potato, but it's even a little brighter than a sweet potato most of the time. These are so filled with vitamin A. This is like your storehouse of vitamin A, obviously because of the color. Every color in any fruit or vegetable that you pick up on the market, the color is what is created by the phytonutrient that it carries, the strongest phytonutrient. Blueberries are the only fruit that have up to 19 phytonutrients in there. They're the only one that has that many. So blueberries really do earn their reputation for being a very nourishing fruit. Now, when it comes to carbohydrate content, that tends to be sometimes why people are turned off of squash or potatoes. This is the carbohydrate nature intended for us to eat, not the box of crackers or the chips or the pasta that we love. These guys are what we're supposed to be eating for our glucose and our carbohydrates. Anything grown from this earth is good for us. So I'm just going to cut this into strips before I even bother to peel it. By the way, if you don't have the time or want to take the time doing what I'm doing, the grocery store does it for you. So buy it pre-cut and just throw it right in. Just burning a couple extra calories on this one. And then I'm just going to take a peeler and peel it like I would a potato. Manganese is another nutrient we'd never think about. Some of us probably don't even necessarily know what that is, and that's okay. But manganese is another nutrient that you're going to find in your butternut squash. A little bit of vitamin E, definitely some vitamin K. Much more vitamin K in your kale that you're about to have in the chowder too, by the way. Okay. See, this is much easier than trying to peel that entire thing. When you can get a grip on a smaller piece, it peels much easier. Okay, now we're just going to chop, oops, there's one more sliver. Chop this up into cubes. Thank you.
What's your favorite squash to cook with?
Honestly, I would say this one or acorn squash. I love acorn squash. Both of them you can use, you can stuff them any time of the year that you want. Christmas time, we tend to do acorn squash and stuff that instead of sweet potato casserole. If you have that in your family and you want to get away from it, I'll tell you a great recipe. So you take acorn squash and pull out the center just like we did here. And then you can chop up Granny Smith apples or any kind of tart apple, oranges, chop those up, and then add some dried, not dried cranberries, whole cranberries, fresh cranberries or frozen. Add a little bit of raw honey, a little bit of cinnamon, and if you need just a touch of orange juice. Pop that into the center of your acorn squash and cover them. Bake them for about an hour. Pull it out. Makes a wonderful citrus and apple-y center to your acorn squash. Some people will do something completely different, more of a savory with maybe like a little bit of ground sausage or ground pork, which adds a little bit of lightness to it. You can do ground turkey and turn it into a sausage by using 95% lean ground turkey, adding sage to it, a little bit of garlic powder, a little bit of onion powder, and now it just kind of took on the flavor of sausage. Saute some onions, some fresh garlic going in there, a little bit of Parmesan cheese, pop that in the centers and bake them. Delicious. Okay, so this is, I'm going to turn this to cancel. We're going to add the rest of our ingredients. Turn this on and let it do its cooking. Garlic's going in. It's had plenty of time to develop. Oops, missed a piece. Okay. Would anyone like to come up and assist me opening cans?
I will, Joy.
Fabulous. My Vanna White. I'm going to give you these over here if you will. Okay. Start opening, and then we will start popping these suckers right in. I will Susan while you open.
Follow the 30 dozen or 5.
I do try. I look each year to see what's. Yeah. So that's a good question. Thanks for bringing that up. Everything that I bought here came from Aldi. I think they do a pretty decent job of making sure there's enough organic options on the shelf and in the produce section. I can find most everything I need there. And this time I literally, for 3 recipes, I shopped solely there. Instacart, by the way. Instacart's a beautiful thing. When it comes to the Clean 15 and Dirty Dozen, yes, I look those up each year and try to check to see what they are. And if it's something that my family is consuming on a regular, like apples, they're eating them every day. Potatoes, we eat pretty regularly at my house. Broccoli, it's every single week we have broccoli. It's like the staple that gets put on the grocery list. So I look for those things. If they are on the Dirty Dozen list, I do try my best to find them organic. Aldi almost always carries those things organic, not potatoes. I only find those at Mark's or Earth Fare or Fresh Time Market, obviously. But otherwise, I also have a wash at home that I use. It's called Fit Wash. And I find that in the produce section of most major grocery stores. So, oh, here we go. Well, sorry. Just teasing. Okay, pumpkin is going into your pot. Why pumpkin? Normally in a chili, you would add a tomato paste, but this is our bourbon chipotle pumpkin chili. So we're adding pumpkin into this. Are you going to taste a mouthful of pumpkin when you eat this? No, there's so much flavor going in, but this is more nutrient density, and it's kind of a thickening agent, if you will. You're doing a fabulous job. Thank you, Anna. Only beans we're going to try instead of all kidney beans. Do whatever works for your family. If nobody likes the white beans, that's okay. Use the red beans. It doesn't matter. Sometimes black beans go over well in this recipe as well. So it really depends on you. I'm just actually, okay. You're good. Nope. Oh, so sorry. Chipotle peppers. This is a can. Do not use the whole can, or you won't be able to even eat your chili. We're going to add 2 or 3, just because the spice is so delicious. There's a little bit of sauce in there, so you can add some of the sauce to your chili if you wish to. I just slice these up well. If you like Chipotle at home, like the restaurant Chipotle, what I do with the rest of these is I put them into a Ziploc bag and freeze them in the freezer. And then when I'm making different recipes that require, I'll pull this out and use a couple more. We will make, like, we try to recreate Chipotle at home. You can do that if you have a pork roast or a beef roast or chicken breast that you want to use. Add 1 or 2 of these into your meat that you're cooking, and it brings home the flavor of Chipotle for yourself. We'll just make rice and all the different side dishes that go along with it, the cilantro rice, etc. Okay, let's check and see where we're at. So I need to change your glove. Need some cumin going in there. Some chili powder.
The lid after the.
You know, it's my measuring cup.
Kind of winging it.
So here's my truth. These are guides, these recipes. We love flavor, so the more seasoning, the better. When it comes to chili recipe and it tells you 2 tablespoons, that's never enough. So adjust. I always go adjust higher. Cumin is like, I feel like the girlfriend, boyfriend of chili powder. So I do the 2 not equally. If I'm doing chili, it's a little bit of cumin. If I'm doing a taco mix, it's more cumin, less chili powder. So start with a couple tablespoons, give it a taste, see what you think, but I already know what I like. So that's what I added. Give this a good stir. With an Instapot, when you put anything in here, it's important to have enough liquid on the bottom or you're going to get a message that says burn. Right? Have you had this? Yeah, so have I too many times. So always make sure you have enough liquid on the bottom of this pot. Last but not least, some corn is going in. This just adds a nice sweet taste to your spicy chili. So we're ready. Let's put the lid on. Hear that music? That means it's sealed. That's your message to know that you can't go back now. And you can't because we haven't sealed it entirely, but that music means that it's turned and it's locked. You have a steam setting and it's what they're calling venting, and then sealed. You want to keep this nozzle on sealed. It moves very easily, so be cautious with it. Keep it on sealed and get started with the pressure cook. As the steam starts to build in here, it's going to take a good 10 minutes for the steam to start to build in here. This will whistle a little bit. That's fine, you know it's doing its job. When it's in the cooking process, it will count down on the timer here for you. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to set this for 10 minutes. Let's go down. Okay, so now it's set. As this starts to fill with steam, this red nozzle that you can't see will pop up and you will be able to see it. This Instapot lid will not allow you to take it off when that little nozzle is up. That's the safety to you. When this is done cooking and it goes to keep warm, this nozzle will stay up, this little button, if you will. There's a way that you can quick release it, and that's what I'm going to show you today because we need to get done, right? We need to be able to eat. So we will quick release this so that you can taste. When we quick release, when you do this in your home, make sure that you're not under a cabinet. If you happen to have a vent on your stove, put this on the stove, do quick release and turn your vent on so it takes that in, because a good bit of steam comes out of here. And we should be good. So we're going to let it do its business while we're over here doing more. Okay, let's move on to the oat loaf or the oat bread. So this recipe's been revised a couple of different times. The goal here is to just give us a nice piece of bread to have with our chili. It's a great breakfast bread. It's a great snack bread. You can do all sorts of things with this bread. Many times we'll do a cornbread, and there's nothing wrong with doing a cornbread, but you can use similar ingredients to what I'm about to use to make a better cornbread. Why do I say better? Because cornbread can be laden with lots of butter, white flour, or lard is oftentimes used with cornbread. So we want to try to alleviate some of that and use coconut oil instead in your cornbread. You can also use oat flour as the flour in your cornbread if you're not using Jiffy. We're talking about homemade cornbread. So equal parts cornmeal and oat flour work really nicely. You could use a rice flour. You could use a quinoa flour where you're just taking the dry quinoa and grinding it up in the blender, creating a flour out of it. These are flours that you can keep in Ziploc bags at home on your shelf instead of buying white flour off of the shelf. So you can kind of start to make changes to the way that you cook at home. They're great thickening agents, so if you're a person who needs to use a thickening agent for whatever you're making, these flours work just fine. So what we do is so simple. You open up your oatmeal, regular cooking oats, quick cooking oats, it doesn't matter what you're choosing to use. Pop it in, and we just grind it up. This happens to be a Vitamix. You can use a food processor. You can use any kind of blender that you've got. I'm just going to walk it over to my plug, my source over here. You can see as it's grinding, it's at a consistency now where there's a good bit of oatmeal chunk to this. This you can use if you're making some kind of a granola bar and you just need your oatmeal to be ground a little bit more fine. I've made pancakes with it this way too, to just give my pancake a little bit more of a grainier flavor or grainier texture to it. Sometimes I just want a little bit more chew factor in it. But we're going to make it complete so that it's a nice fluffy flour. Okay, we're all set. Now we have plenty of flour to use for our recipe here. This makes, I mentioned, pancakes. It's a great weekend pancake to make. So simple. A cup of this flour, a teaspoon of baking powder, 1 egg, couple of tablespoons of oil of your choice, hopefully a good oil like an avocado or an olive oil or a grapeseed oil or a sunflower seed oil. And then a little bit of milk of your choice, milk alternative, dairy milk, whatever you're using. A little less than a cup, you don't need quite a full cup or you'll have a pretty runny pancake mix. Add a teaspoon of cinnamon in there, a teaspoon of vanilla if you want to, and you've got great pancake mix that you can make, or pancake batter. Make extra. If it's more than just you eating at home and you've got a few people that you have to feed through the week, make extra, pop them into the freezer. So you've got now your own homemade freezer pancakes that you pop into the toaster quickly in the morning. Top up with some natural peanut butter or almond butter. So now we've got a great flour. When I made the oat bread, what I did is I used 2 cups of this flour into my bowl. The baking powder went in. Another ½ cup of regular oatmeal went in here. This is my sweetening agent. This is raw honey. If you don't have access to raw honey, you can find it at the grocery store. If you know somebody who sells it, buy it off the streets. That's where I usually get my raw honey. Eggs and honey off the street is the best that you can get. Those folks do a great job of honoring, if you will, the environment and respecting the bees, and they do an excellent job. They can share so much information with you about the benefits of raw honey to our systems. But this works great in this recipe as an alternative to a brown sugar or a white sugar. So I added that in with the milk, along with a couple tablespoons of oil, mixed it up, 1 egg, and then just added it to the dry ingredients. Remember, this was just your oatmeal, your oat flour, and your baking powder. Give it a good mix. You want to season this differently? I have a coworker actually who took this recipe and decided to make it into a breakfast bread. So she'll add cinnamon and raisins sometimes. Sometimes she'll do shredded carrots and zucchini for like more of a zucchini bread sort of thing, or a carrot cake. And then nuts. Plenty of nuts. Any nut goes into this nice. Pecans, almonds, walnuts, crushed, sauteed. So lots of options with this oat bread. But this is a very nice complement to a soup, to a chowder. The other thing that I wanted to mention, or we talked about the cornbread and using this as the alternative to your flour. So this guy is over here still continuing to do his job. We are so it's still in the process of holding the steam. Let's talk about a couple different things that you can do in the Instapot at home while we're waiting for this to do its job. If you're coming off of work and you haven't prepared anything and you're thinking, great, what am I going to make for dinner? You can pull anything. When I say thing, I'm talking about a meat. We'll start with that, and then we can go to vegetarian options. But you can pull any meat out of the freezer and cook it from frozen in this Instapot. You don't have to saute it first. Normally, when you sear a meat, it does help seal in the flavor. However, it can be done from frozen just as easily. Pop it in, season it the way you want it, put it in, put the lid on. Within less than an hour, you can have a nice roast, cube steak, pork loin, chicken breast, whatever it is that you're cooking, and the flavoring agent that you're adding. I need to take a quick drink and get it dry. But that will start the protein portion of your meal. Maybe you have a stir fry you're making and you need a rice. The rice we use at home is a long grain cooking rice. It takes an hour to cook. 10 minutes in this guy. So the rice goes in while I'm chopping the chicken, or chopping the pork, or chopping the vegetables, whatever I'm using for my stir fry. And within less than 20 minutes, I've got a full stir fry meal ready because the cooking time is so quick. I explained to you before how we'll make chipotle. We'll use this for the meat and pull it out. And then while I'm preparing the other things, I'm gonna have to do another drink, excuse me. I'll just rinse it out and use this for the rice so that it's a quick cooking meal. Hands down, it's the best. I've done a cream soup in here. Cream of potato soup, that's another popular comfort food this time of the year. Potatoes usually take a good hour to cook, especially if you're boiling them maybe 30 to 40 minutes. In this Instapot, 10 minutes for the cream soup. So you just add all of your ingredients in, lid on. 5 or 10 minutes cooking time. And then you put it on the saute method when it's done, and you thicken it through the saute method. because that allows it to boil. Anybody have any questions first of all, any thoughts, anything that you're making at home? You wonder if it can be done quicker? Google's your friend. If you can't, that's how I actually figure out a lot of things. Can I do this in an Instapot versus for my crock pot versus on a stovetop at home versus in the oven for 20 minutes or whatever it is that I happen to be making. So that's been very effective. What I'm gonna do while this is continuing so that you don't have to just stand here and stare at me, we're gonna start dishing up some samples so that you can taste.
Just so everyone knows too, we'll be sending out the recipes there as well, so you have.
Do I need help? Sure, feel free.